Kemper was arraigned this afternoon on charges of killing 6 young women, his mother, and a friend of hers over a period of time from May 7, 1972 to the 21st of this month. All the victims except one, the woman friend of his mother, were dismembered. All the young women, 5 college co-eds and 15-year-old Aiko Koo of Berkeley, were last seen hitchhiking.
He apparently, according to what he says, fantasized about doing this for quite a long period of time.
December 18, 1948, Edmund Kemper Roman III was born in Burbank, California, U.S. to his father, WW2 veteran Edmund Kemper Roman II, and mother Cornell Stage, as their second child and only son. During childhood, Kemper grew much faster than his peers, developing a massive physique that dwarfed others from a young age. This rapid physical growth caused others to feel alienation and inexplicable fear, labeling him as a monstrous child in their eyes, which became a factor that isolated him. But Kemper himself, despite his large body, held no authority or control at home, feeling mentally suffocated and repressed, and gradually spent more time alone. His mother, Cornell Stage, was alcohol dependent, repeatedly subjecting her children to extreme mood swings and verbal abuse, and specifically, seeing her son begin to resemble his father, she treated Kemper as a dangerous being, venting her own fear and anger onto him. As his parents filed for official divorce in 1957, the family structure completely collapsed. Kemper tried to leave his mother and rely on his father, but his father reacted coldly, ultimately rejecting and shunning him. The experience of successive rejection by his parents deepened his isolation. Afterward, Kemper had to live in a subservient relationship with his oppressive mother, and after moving to Helena, Montana, following the divorce, his mother's control and abuse intensified further. His mother feared that he might use his massive body to harm his younger sisters, so to separate him from the family, she made him sleep alone in a windowless basement room only a few meters wide. The prolonged period of basement isolation isolated Kemper from the outside world and normal social relations, and it is analyzed that within such a confined environment, he developed distorted hostility toward women and a desire to control others. According to later analysis by forensic psychologists and Kemper's own statements, the sadistic fantasies and desire for control formed in the basement during this period are evaluated as having become a decisive psychological link that led him to choose the car interior as a mobile confined space, an environment where he could easily search for and control his victims. While isolated in the basement, Kemper began to use his high cognitive ability and strong fantasies to start hiding his own behavior, and exhibited stereotyped patterns of animal abuse. He would take his sister's dolls, venting his need for control by decapitating or dismembering them, and would catch small creatures like neighborhood stray cats or livestock, burying them alive only to dig them up again, and engaging in the habit of mutilating their bodies. At age 13, he killed his own cat with a knife and hid the carcass in his bedroom closet, where it was discovered by his mother. Past criminal psychological research has analyzed Kemper's childhood animal abuse by connecting it to the McDonald trial along with bedwetting and arson. This is a classical hypothesis that such behaviors in childhood can serve as later warning signs associated with violence. In Kemper's case especially, animal abuse was not just simple cruelty, but was analyzed as initial behavior where suppressed anger and desire for control were vented on weaker targets. However, modern criminology does not view these factors as a single cause of serial murder, but interprets them as the result of various psychological and environmental factors.
You were able to appear like an ordinary person, non-threatening to...
I lived as an ordinary person most of my life, even though I was living a parallel and increasingly sick life, other life.
You were involved in the campus because your mother worked there.
Yes. I was also involved in killing co-eds because my mother was associated with college work, college co-eds, women, and had a very strong and violently outspoken position on men for much of my upbringing. My mother was a sick, angry, hungry, and very sad woman. I hated her, but I wanted to love my mother.
In 1963, as conflicts and control from his mother reached a breaking point, Kemper ran away from home and visited his father in California again. However, his father had already remarried and started a new family, and he did not accept Kemper. Ultimately, he was sent to his grandparents' home in Madera County, California. His grandfather, C.B. Stage, was a strict man who ran a dairy farm, and his grandmother, like his mother Cornell, is known to have shown strong control and a critical attitude toward Kemper. Feeling despair at being rejected by his father again and experiencing extreme isolation and frustration under his grandparents' control, he continued a life again cut off from the world. 1 year later, on August 27, 1964, emotions that had been building up under his grandparents' strict control finally began to manifest in an extreme way. 15-year-old Edmund Kemper, in the yard of his grandparents' ranch, approached behind his grandmother, Maud Stage, who was coming out of the kitchen, and killed her with his grandfather's hunting rifle. Immediately immediately after, as his grandfather was driving home from ranch work. He killed Seabury Stage with a targeted shot. According to his statement, the crime stemmed from a desire to test how my mother would react if I did something she would hate. It was the first instance where his deep anger and distorted feelings toward his mother erupted into violence. Kemper immediately used the home telephone to call the Madera County Sheriff's Office himself, confessing, "I shot my grandmother and grandfather," and was arrested without resistance by arriving police, evaluated with severe mental and antisocial issues. Kemper was sent to the Atascadero State Hospital in California instead of facing a criminal trial. At the time, he was a giant standing 206 cm tall, weighing merely 130 kg. During his stay, Kemper used his intellect and verbal skills to maintain an exemplary record, focusing on building survival strategies within the system rather than internal change. While confined as a violent and immature juvenile offender, he grasped the intent behind the questions from psychiatric staff, developing the ability to act out the image evaluators expected. He dramatically improved his ability to converse with medical staff, successfully constructing a persona of a model inmate who fully controls impulses and feels deep remorse. At the time, hospital staff failed to fully grasp his dangerousness and hidden dark inner self, resulting in a decision for social reintegration that led to tragedy. The skills of mimicking social responses and self-presentation Kemper learned then were later used to evade social scrutiny. The 1960s correctional system prioritized juvenile rehabilitation, focusing on offenders recognizing their wrongdoing, changing, and returning to society. But evaluation systems had limits in distinguishing between a carefully crafted model inmate persona and his true psyche. On December 18, 1969, reaching the age of 21, Kemper was cleared for release based on medical judgment that he was no longer a threat to society due to legal procedures. His childhood record of parricide was sealed from public view, preventing risk information from reaching general society, and within the limitations of the protection system then, he returned as a regular citizen with no criminal record restrictions. After his release, Kemper paradoxically returned to the home in Santa Cruz, California, where his mother Carnell, who had isolated and abused him and worked as staff, lived and reunited with her.
Oh, he was kind of an odd man. He didn't say much. He seemed like kind of a mama's boy. I always was kind of afraid of him, actually. He scared me a lot, and I heard him and his mother argue quite a bit, all the time. He was an average person. He blended in with everybody. I mean, he talked a lot. When we had a barbecue down here in the backyard last July, but the only time he didn't talk too much was when, like, if I'd meet him in the garage by myself, or he was coming in and I was going out, or the other way around. All he would say is hi, and that was it. But if you tried to start a conversation with him, it was kind of useless. You know, he never really volunteered anything.
How do you feel now that you found out he was a neighbor?
Scared stiff, because he really was a neighbor. I lived right next door in the next apartment next to him, and it just gives me the creeps. It's kind of an understatement.
Kemper, known to have a high IQ of 145, attempted to enroll in college after returning to society, but apart from his high intellectual ability, he failed to adapt to the academic and social environment, and ultimately experienced failure as opportunities for social advancement and recognition through academics were blocked. Kemper turned to creating a thorough persona of a normal citizen to build a trustworthy image among those around him, while building a reputation as a polite and diligent man to neighbors. He began to actively reveal his long-held and deep interest in police organizations. His childhood aspiration to become a police officer went beyond mere professional admiration, leading to a craving for an authorized group that symbolizes social power and control. He was able to hide his past due to his sealed criminal record, and based on this, gradually learned how to present himself within society and gain the trust of others. Later, his childhood interest in the police evolved into a complex obsession with the investigative agencies that were meant to monitor him. Between 1970 and 1971, Kemper found work as a road surveyor for the California Highway Department, securing a stable job and regular income, with which he purchased a Ford Galaxy. After night shifts or on his days off, he would drive and roam aimlessly around Santa Cruz and nearby college areas. At the same time, he frequently visited the jury room, a police exclusive bar located near the Santa Cruz Police Department, building friendships with active duty officers and detectives. The relationships Kemper formed at the jury room went beyond social activity, becoming a foundation for him to position himself as someone close to the police society he admired. Officers nicknamed the friendly, over 2 meter tall highway worker Big Ed, sharing drinks with him and through conversations with them, Kemper could closely observe internal police relationships, response tactics, and investigation procedures, along with the organization's atmosphere.
They'd buy me a beer, I'd buy them a beer. Casual relationships, but I was poking around a little bit trying to find some things out. I knew they wouldn't be privy to hot information, but there were some things that were bothering me, like were there any speculations on how they were dying?
Did the cops like you?
Like I said, a friendly nuisance. I got in the way, and it was deliberate. Again, friendly nuisances are dismissed.
How did you get the knowledge to outsmart the police?
Watching television, believe it or not, Joseph Wambaugh, police story. Got some tremendous insights into not just the gimmicks, the actual things, the tidbits that he would pick up from their procedures, but the mechanics behind it, the logic behind it, was I would not allow myself to walk into even a potential trap of behavior. And one of those was talking about those crimes too much to people, initiating conversations about that.
He recognized that these relationships acted as a factor that lowered the guard of those around him toward himself, and consequently, the friendly image and police connections he cultivated served as a crucial foundation for gaining the trust of police and others and avoiding suspicion. In May 1972, the method of crime Kemper had formulated in his mind began to be executed in reality for the first time, driving his Ford vehicle. While roaming near Highway 1 by Santa Cruz, he spotted Berkeley students Mary Ann Pess and Anita Lucchesa, who were hitchhiking, and stopped the car. Kemper opened the passenger door, showed his highway department pass, and introduced himself as a reliable young man with a steady job. Although his massive frame could have raised suspicion in those he first met due to his friendly demeanor and professional image that inspired trust, the two students did not perceive him as a dangerous person and ultimately boarded the vehicle without any suspicion. Kemper drove them to a remote hillside, murdered them, loaded their bodies into his car trunk, and moved them to his Santa Cruz bedroom while his mother was away. He mutilated the bodies in the bedroom, recorded the process with a Polaroid camera, and later placed the remains in plastic bags, disposing of them in dense brush in the Santa Cruz Mountains near Loma Prieta. Even after his first human crime, Kemper went back to his daily routine at the highway department uncaught, continuing to drink with detectives at the jury room, where he could closely observe the progress of the missing persons investigation. He experienced that his persona, the social image of a reliable professional he created, and the trust and deception structure built through it were actually working, led to a distorted sense of superiority in deceiving even investigators, and his criminal method of exploiting trust began to evolve into more sophisticated forms thereafter.
Why did you actually kill the girls?
My frustration, my inability to communicate socially, sexually, I wasn't impotent, but emotionally I was impotent. I was scared to death of failing in male-female relationships. I knew absolutely nothing about that whole area. Even if just sitting down and talking with a young lady, I need to be able to really communicate. And ironically enough, that's why I began picking people up. And I'm picking up young women. And I'm going a little bit farther each time. It's a daring kind of a thing.
In early 1972, Kemper began to design a meticulous criminal mechanism to realize his violent fantasies in reality. He conspicuously displayed a UC Santa Cruz parking sticker on his Ford Galaxy, his mobile crime scene and private chamber. He exploited the hitchhiking culture prevalent on campus then, using his stable civil service job and a sense of belonging from the parking sticker to entice female students to board his vehicle without suspicion, perfecting his approach. The instinctive threat posed by his massive physique was perfectly masked by the polite, friendly persona he acted out. In May 1972, immediately after he murdered his first victims, Mary Ann Pess and Anita Lucchesa, the authorities' reactions served as the critical trigger accelerating his crimes. Despite the disappearance of the two students, initial investigations were treated as separate cases, and at the time, investigative agencies lacked the intelligence to determine criminal possibilities in-house missing persons cases. The pattern of serial crimes occurring during hitchhiking was also not yet revealed, so the link or possibility of murder between the two cases went unnoticed. As there was almost no investigation pursued from May to September, Kemper became increasingly convinced that his social disguise and his approach were effective in reality. The fact that the possibility of serial crimes did not emerge in initial investigations, and that those around him did not suspect him, developed into a misguided conviction that he could control his crimes, becoming the psychological foundation for moving on to riskier, bolder crimes.
My mother worked at the campus and I had an A sticker on my car and obvious access day or night to the campus. I was picking up some very lovely young women. She judged me not to be that guy. I didn't look like him. It was getting easier to do. I was getting better at it. I was getting less detectable.
Thereafter, Kemper repeatedly scouted for victims, using the approach method he had established on September 14, 1972. While patrolling around campus In his vehicle, Kemper approached 15-year-old dance student Aiko, who was hitchhiking to dance class after missing her bus, and politely offered to drive her to her destination. Immediately after locking the doors and turning onto a deserted road, Kemper used his overwhelming size advantage to overpower and strangle the resisting victim. On January 8, 1973, the following year, he picked up 18-year-old Cindy Shaw, who was hitchhiking to attend college classes at Cabrillo College, murdered her, and transported her body home to mutilate it in his mother's bathtub. In particular, he buried the severed skulls in the soil of the garden in his mother's backyard, later stating that he wanted to mock her every day by burying the bodies right under the garden, where she always nagged me. This showed that the violence against his victims was a result of twisted hatred and the desire for control, originating from his mother and projected onto others. The cycle of his crimes grew shorter, and becoming bolder. Kemper committed another crime on February 5 of the same year, targeting 2 victims at once. He first picked up 23-year-old Rosalind Thorpe, who was leading a lecture at UC Santa Cruz. He then spotted Alice Liu, who was hitchhiking on campus, and pulled her over. Seeing Thorpe in the front seat, Liu also climbed in. Kemper stopped his car on the shoulder of an outer highway and murdered both of them in succession. Some of their remains were found at the foot of a cliff days later, but authorities failed to secure decisive physical evidence identifying the culprit, and the investigation showed no significant progress. As consecutive disappearances and murders of female college students occurred, the Santa Cruz police finally expanded their investigation and began an intensive probe around the campus area. However, the most ironic situation during this period was unfolding at the Joy Room, police-only bar outside the investigation headquarters, and authorities continued their investigation without ever realizing it. Serial killer Kemper appeared at his regular bar every night, clinking glasses with the detectives in charge of the investigation, asking, "Is there any progress on the case? Or any new clues?" as he kept the conversation going, continuously tracking the investigation status of the college student disappearances. This was an ironic situation where Kemper maintained a close relationship with investigators and peeked into the flow of the case, while he remained completely excluded from the suspect list. While the investigation hovered around the campus, the conflict inside Kemper with his final target and source of violent impulses, his mother Tarnell Stage, was reaching an irreversible tipping point.
I got the gun in the car, the same one I've been doing it with. I insisted, as gently as I could, I took them where they needed to go, to their college. That was 1 week before I murdered my mother. I said, she's got to die, and I've got to die, or girls like that are going to die. And that's when I decided I'm going to murder my mother. I knew a week before she died, I was going to kill her. And what's her closing words? I suppose you want to sit up all night and talk. God, I wish I had.
Even after murdering 6 young women, Kemper's anger did not dissipate. Although the victims were gone, the mother he had hated his entire life remained in the same house. Ultimately, the final remaining target was the mother toward whom his anger had been directed from the start. On April 20, 1973, silence fell over the Santa Cruz home. Kemper waited in silence for the opportunity until his mother, Tarnell Stage, whom he felt had repressed, taunted, and insulted him his whole life, fell fast asleep. Around 1 a.m., Kemper entered the bedroom silently in the dark and murdered his sleeping mother using a hammer and a knife. The subsequent mutilation Kemper committed was the moment his long-suppressed hatred exploded. He severed his mother's head and placed it on the living room table, then cut out her vocal cords, put them in the kitchen disposal, and turned it on. According to court records, this act was his distorted desire for control, expressed in the most brutal form. Wanting to silence that voice that had yelled at me my whole life. After hiding his mother's body in a closet, Kemper remained calm even after the crime. The next day, April 21, he called 59-year-old Sarah Hallett, his mother's best friend and a university administrator, and poorly lied, saying his mother had planned a surprise party and invited her to the house that evening. Sarah Hallett, who arrived at the house without suspicion, was overpowered by Kemper waiting in the hallway and strangled, and her body was dumped in a bedroom closet. The exact reason Kemper murdered Sarah Hallett remains unknown. However, as she was close to his mother and was killed immediately after the crime, investigators raised the possibility that it was an act to prevent the murder of his mother from being discovered. After the disappearance of his mother, the target of his lifelong obsession, Kemper's string of crimes came to an abrupt end, leaving both bodies hidden in his home. Kemper loaded a handgun and ammunition into his mother's car and began fleeing east across state lines. He drove for 2 days straight, crossing Nevada, and reached Pueblo, Colorado, 1,500 kilometers away, even as news reports of the bodies discovered in his Santa Cruz home and the massive investigation began airing on the car radio. The police pursuit had yet to catch up with him on the road. The moment he realized the authorities could not catch him, a distorted sense of superiority from outsmarting law enforcement and the hollowness from having no reason to continue his crime struck him, and the certainty that police would never find him paradoxically led him to stop his flight and choose to end his escape himself. On the night of April 23, inside a public phone booth in Pueblo, Colorado, Kemper picked up the receiver and called the Santa Cruz Sheriff's Office, which he frequented. He identified himself to the officer on duty and calmly confessed to killing his mother, Sarah Hallett, and all the missing young women himself. However, the police, who usually drank with him at the jury room and knew him only as a friendly regular, could not initially accept his confession due to the gap between the Kemper they knew and the truth of him being a serial killer. Frustrated by the police's failure to come arrest him, Kemper contacted the local Pueblo police again a few hours later and demanded to be arrested, giving specific details about the bodies and their locations that only the culprit could know. The next morning at dawn, when officers surrounded the phone booth, he was waiting for the responding officers without any resistance. Arrested on the spot, Kemper was immediately extradited to California, and as forensics teams raided his Santa Cruz home and backyard, evidence including the remains and belongings of the students and crime record photos were surfaced one after another. Due to Kemper's voluntary surrender by contacting the police himself, the investigation into the serial murders that had gripped California in fear for nearly a year finally concluded.
Why did you wind up giving yourself up?
It had to stop. It had to stop. Once my mother was dead, there was almost a cathartic process at that point. I got physically ill right then when she died, when I murdered her. And once she was dead, there was no way I could back out. I had backed down from giving up 1,000 times. You know, I used to get drunk and go sit out in front of the sheriff's department in a parking lot across the street on one of those little concrete parking berms. And I just sit there and say, no, I still can't. The clanging doors, I could still hear them. No, because it'll never open again. You know, so I rationalized that to give up would be insane. To give up would be crazy. I'd be giving away my freedom, and I don't need to. But I look back on that and wish I had earlier when I was saying those things to myself. The people who were later dead wouldn't be. The regret that came later would have not had to be. Those people, not things, those people would still be with their families, with their loved ones. They would have their own families if I had had the courage to make that decision instead of painting myself into the corner.
In October 1973, in the Santa Cruz County Superior Court in California, the main trial for Edmund Kemper began. During the trial, the defense team argued that he was not responsible due to his mental state, citing his childhood abuse and history at Atascadero State Hospital. However, the prosecution proved his crimes were premeditated, based on his destruction of evidence and efforts to evade police. Searches of Kemper's Ford Galaxy yielded critical physical evidence, including victims' belongings and traces of remains, revealing the full extent of his crimes in court. Kemper also testified in detail about his crimes from the stand, shocking the jury. When the judge offered him a final statement, he declared, "I have no intention of returning to society, so give me life without parole or the death penalty," expressing his desire to be isolated from society. On November 8, the jury found Kemper guilty on all 8 counts of first-degree murder, and the court sentenced him to consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. After his sentencing, Kemper was incarcerated at the California Medical Facility, a maximum security prison. The murders Kemper confessed to totaled 10 people, including his 2 grandparents, whom he murdered as a boy, 6 young women, his mother, and her friend. Of these, all 8 murders committed after he reached adulthood resulted in convictions. After his imprisonment, Kemper, with his high intelligence and verbal skills, became a notable figure in criminal psychology research. In the late 1970s, when FBI Behavioral Science Unit special agents John Douglas and Robert Resser visited Vacaville Prison to study the psychological traits of serial killers, Kemper was one of the inmates who most actively participated in the interviews. During hundreds of hours of in-depth interviews, he described the fantasies serial killers had before crimes, their psychological state during body mutilation, and his methods for stalking victims and luring them into his vehicle. His detailed psychological testimony served as crucial material for early research into serial killer profiling and law enforcement criminal analysis. In addition, Kemper participated in volunteer work recording audiobooks for the visually impaired, reading and recording hundreds of literary and technical books in his own voice over decades. Although eligible for parole several times during his incarceration, he remained opposed to returning to society, and to this day, Kemper continues to serve his sentence in a California correctional facility.
Where might you be if you'd never given in to the impulse to murder?
Where might I be? If my parole had been successful, I believe I'd be married, I'd have children, I'd be heading toward my first grandchildren.
The basement cell that once isolated a boy from the world eventually became another cell, a vehicle used to trap others. Under his parents' misguided control, the uncontrollable rage he felt toward his mother was projected into violence that destroyed the lives of innocent people. A man's twisted desire for control, formed through suppressed hatred, ultimately remained as the reality of violence returned upon society.